Ever wondered how top designers create those clean, modern websites in Figma? In this crash course, I'll show you how to master Figma's most powerful features from auto layout and components to AI tools and prototyping. In just 90 minutes, you'll learn everything you need to start designing stunning websites and apps today. No experience needed. And if you're serious about mastering UI design and becoming a professional UI UX designer, you can check out my comprehensive UI Design and Figma Mastery course at thedesignmastery.com after watching this video. So let's dive in. Alright, first things first, if you're new to Figma and you have no account, head over to figma.com and hit this Get Started for Free button and you can sign up for free. You can use Figma on your browser or you can head over to the products right here and head over to the downloads page, and from here just download the desktop app. You can get it for Mac or Windows. However, I personally prefer to use the browser version of Figma. Here you can see the pricing page as well. For now, if you're a beginner, you don't need to have a paid account. You can use the majority of Figma features for free. So make sure to create a free account, and once you're logged in, you'll land on the Figma dashboard. Here on the left side, you'll see recents, then drafts, trash, all projects, and right here at the bottom, you'll see this Explore Community button. And on the right side, you'll see these big buttons. We have new design file, new Fig Jamboard, new slide deck, and import. And right here, you can preview all your recently viewed projects. If you head over to drafts, you can start creating private projects. You can organize all your projects right here. You can also create a team from this drop-down menu. If I just click on it, you can create a new team. You can give your team a name, add team members to it, and just start collaborating with other team members. All right, but for now, we are not gonna create a team here. And if you're looking for inspiration, UI kits, design templates, etc., you can head over to the community right here. And here's where you can find different design resources such as plugins, UI kits, etc. We'll dive into it later, but for now, just keep in mind that there is a design community in Figma. All right, now before we start creating a project, let me show you how you can personalize your workspace. All right, so if I just head over to this top left menu and I click on it, here I can change the theme. If you prefer light mode, you can easily set it to light. If you prefer dark mode, you can set it to dark, or you can just leave it as system theme. Then you have settings. You can also get the desktop app from here using this option, and you can add different accounts here and switch between different accounts from this section. All right. So what about these buttons? This first button, the new design file button, allows you to create a design file, as its name suggests. And that's basically the button we use almost all the time. Here we also have the new Fig Jamboard. This is another product of Figma. It's basically a whiteboard for brainstorming, gathering your ideas, etc. We're not going to discuss it in this video, but keep in mind that it exists. We also have this new slide deck button, which allows you to create a presentation. It's also another product of Figma. But what about this import button? Well, if you want to import different design files into your dashboard, you can use this import button. However, keep in mind that we don't use this button for importing assets like images or icons, etc. Okay, this button exists to let you import design files like Figma files or sketch files. If you've used Sketch, which is another design software, and you want to import your sketch file into Figma, you can use this button. Alternatively, you can just drag and drop your files into your Figma dashboard. All right, so that's all about the dashboard. Now let's go ahead and start creating our design file. I'm gonna hit this blue button here, and I'll be taken to the Figma editor. Here is where we design our projects. Generally, we can divide this whole interface into 4 main sections. We have the canvas, which is this middle section, this gray area right in the middle. That's where we place our elements like frames, shapes, text, pictures, etc. Basically, we design everything right here. Then we have the navigation panel on the left side. Here we have the file section and the asset section. Right here under the file section, we have 2 main sections. We have pages and we have layers, okay? Under the pages, you can create different pages in order to organize your projects. For instance, you might need to create a design system for your project. In that case, you can hit this plus icon right here, name it design system, and you can start creating your design system right here. And you can easily switch between these pages. Keep in mind that each page has its own canvas. All right. And here under the layers list, you'll see all your layers. We'll talk about layers in a few minutes, but for now, keep in mind that all your layers will be organized right here. What about the Assets tab? Here is where you can find your UI kits, your components, basically anything that's reusable will be organized right here. For example, here as you can see, we have some default UI kits, iOS 18 plus iPadOS 18. We also have Material 3 Design Kit and this Figma Simple Design System. You can also add more libraries here. You can even create your own library. If you have your own design system, you can add it to your project using this option. Okay, here we have libraries, and from here you can just go ahead and add libraries to your project. All right, here right at the top, you'll see the file name. By default, it's set to untitled. To rename it, you can easily click on it and just change it. Let's change it to draft, like this. Now, if I click on this arrow icon right here, I'll see these menus such as show version history, export, add to sidebar, create branch, etc. For now, we are not going to discuss these options as they are not that important. Right here, if I just click on this Figma icon, I can access this file's settings, okay? I can head over to file, I can head over to edit, view, object, text, arrange, vector. Most of the time, we won't need to adjust anything here. But keep in mind that sometimes if you want to change the preferences of your project, you can head over to the preferences right here and just enable or disable something. Just keep that in mind. The next thing you need to keep in mind is that you can expand these panels just like that, but also you can collapse them if you need more space for your project. If I just click on this button, it allows me to minimize UI just like this. The next component of the editor is the toolbar right here at the bottom. Essentially, the toolbar is a hub for all your design tools. Here you can find everything you need to design an interface. Here you can find the move tool, hand tool, scale. Then here we have frame, section, and slice. Here we have different shape tools. We will talk about all these in a few minutes. Then we have the pen tool, the text tool, the comment tool, and the actions panel, and finally the dev mode. And the last component of the editor is the properties panel on the right side. Here's where you can modify the properties of your elements. Currently, since we haven't selected any element, we don't see all the properties. Here we only see the page background color property, which allows us to change the canvas background color. Okay, just like that. So when nothing is selected on the canvas, here you will see all your local styles. For example, color styles, text styles, etc. In addition to the design panel, we also have the prototype panel, which allows us to create a prototype. Basically, this panel allows us to create interactive elements. For example, if you want to make a button interactive, you can use this prototype panel. And the last thing I'm going to mention here is this question mark icon right at the bottom right corner, okay? If I just click on it, you'll see a few options. If you want to learn more about Figma keyboard shortcuts, you can click on this option, and here you'll have different categories of shortcuts. For example, we have essentials, tools, view, zoom, text, etc. You can go through them and look for your specific needs and just learn them. Now, if you've used Figma before, I'm pretty sure you're aware that Figma has updated its interface from the ground up. And currently we are using UI 3. However, if you want to use the old interface, you can head over to this question mark, and from here, you can click on go back to previous UI. And as soon as I do that, as you can see, the toolbar is repositioned and it's placed right at the top. That's basically the old interface. However, for this video, I'm just gonna stick with UI 3, which is the latest Figma interface. All right, now that you're familiar with the editor's interface, let's start talking about all these tools right here in the toolbar. These are basically the building blocks of your design. So let's start with this one, the frame tool. And as soon as I select it, on the right side, I'll see these pre-built frames. Here we have phone, we have Android compact, we have iPhone 16, 16 Pro, etc. Then we have tablet, desktop, presentation, watch, paper, etc. Okay, you can use one of these pre-built frames if you want to. For example, I'm going to select iPhone 16, and as soon as I do that, this new frame appears right here, and also you can see that it's been added to my layers list right here. And since it's selected, you can see it's highlighted here in the layers list as well. But what if you want to change the dimension of your frames? You can simply select it, head over to this drop down menu right here, and you can change it easily. For example, I can change it to iPhone 16 Pro instead of 16. So that's basically how you can create a pre-built frame. However, if you want to create a custom size frame, what you can do is just hit F or A on your keyboard. That's the shortcut for the frame tool. You can see the shortcut appears right here next to the tool. And then you can just click and drag somewhere like this. And this way you can easily draw a custom size frame, just like that. So what are frames for? Frames allow you to define the boundaries of your design. It could be a web page, it could be a mobile application, or even a UI component. Imagine you want to design a web page. It could be a landing page. The first thing you want to do is add a frame to your canvas, and then you will start adding more and more elements to your frame. So the frame allows us to specify the dimensions, or let's say the boundaries of our design. Currently, since this frame is selected, on the right side you can see that many properties appeared. We have the position, and here we have the alignments. These are not enabled yet. Then we have the coordinates. We have X, Y, then we have the rotation property and these flip options. Right underneath, we have the layout section. Here's where you can define the width and height of your frame. Essentially, here is where you can define the width and height of any element you select. So here, as you can see, the width is set to 349. If I want to change it, what I can do is just select it and just type in another value, for example, 500, hit enter, and it will immediately change. The same thing applies to the height property. Alternatively, I can just hover over this width property, click and scrub, just like this, to decrease or increase the size. But there is one more way to adjust the frame size. You can simply hover over this blue line boundary, like here, and as soon as your cursor's icon changes, you can simply left click and drag to modify its width, just like this. All right, good. Now to remove this frame, you can select it and hit delete on your keyboard. Now let's hit A or F to create another frame. I'm gonna head over to desktop and I'm just gonna add a desktop frame, just like this. Now you might ask, how can I move around the canvas? Well, it's so simple. To move around the canvas, you can hold down the space bar on your keyboard, then left click and drag, just like this. Okay? If you want to zoom in or zoom out, you can hold down the command or control key on your keyboard and then scroll using your mouse wheel, just like this. All right, so here is our frame. Now let's discuss the other options. Here we have the section tool and the slice tool. We use the section tool to organize our frames on the canvas. Let's say you have many frames. For example, you've designed many different pages for a mobile application and you just want to organize them. To do that, you can use the section tool and just left click and drag, just like this. And now as you can see, we have this section 1 and our frame, our desktop frame, is placed inside this section 1. All right. And if I just make it a bit bigger, and let's say I want to add another frame, I'm going to hit A on my keyboard and just draw another frame inside. Now both of these frames are placed inside this section, and I can simply rename this section if I just double click here and just change it to desktop, for instance. Okay, it's quite useful when you want to organize many pages. For instance, let's say you designed a website, and this website has different breakpoints, for example, desktop, tablet, and mobile. What you can do is just create 3 different sections, call them desktop, tablet, and mobile, and just place all the desktop frames in the desktop section, all the tablet frames in the tablet, and all the mobile frames in the mobile section. This way, you can make sure that everything is understandable and is clear to work with. Okay, so that's basically how the section works. We also have the slice tool, which allows you to select a specific portion of an element and export it. We are not going to discuss it now. All right, now let's get rid of this desktop section and just add another frame. You know what to do. Hit A on your keyboard and just select one of these pre-built frames like that. And now it's time to move on to the shape tools. Here, as you can see, we have many different primitive shape tools. We have rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, star, and we also have this image video element. These are the most basic building blocks of any design. Usually when you want to design an interface, you use these shapes a lot: a rectangle, line, ellipse, polygon, etc. And again, you can find the shortcut for each one of these shape tools right next to it. Okay, so let's start with the rectangle. I'm going to select it. To draw a rectangle, just like frames, you can just left click somewhere and drag, just like that. So now I just drew this rectangle, and as you can see, the dimension is set to 362 by 381 pixels. But what if you want to create a perfect square? Well, in that case, what we need to do is select the shape tool, hold down the shift key on your keyboard, left click and drag. This way, as you can see, the width and height of this shape are the same, allowing us to create a perfect square, okay? And it works for all shapes, keep that in mind. All right, now that we have this shape, let's see what kind of properties we have here. On the right side, since this object is selected, you can see different properties. Here we have the position properties, like the alignment. If you want to align this object to the left, you can simply hit this one. If you want to align it to the center, you can simply hit this one. These are the horizontal alignments, and these are the vertical alignments. All right. You can align your elements vertically and horizontally. And here we have the X and Y coordinates. If I set it to 0 and 0, you will see that it will be placed on the top left corner of this frame, which is the parent of this rectangle. As you can see here, we have this rectangle inside this desktop frame. This desktop frame is the parent of this element, and this rectangle is the child of this desktop frame. All right, so that's how the coordinates work. Right underneath, we have the constraints. We are going to discuss this option a bit later because it's a bit more advanced. Next, we have the rotation property, which allows you to rotate your object just like that. You can use these options as well. Flip horizontal, flip vertical. I'm going to set it to 0. And underneath, we have the layout. We already discussed it. We have the width, height, and here we have this icon which says lock aspect ratio. All right, so let's say I'm going to resize this element. If I just left click here and drag, I can freely adjust its width and height. However, if you want to make sure that you maintain the aspect ratio of this shape when you're resizing it, you can just lock the aspect ratio using this icon. I'm going to lock it now, and then if I try to resize it, as you can see, the aspect ratio is maintained, which is a quite helpful option, especially when it comes to resizing images. The next property we are going to discuss is the appearance. Here we have the opacity property, and also we have the corner radius. The opacity property allows you to make an element transparent. By default, it's set to 100%, which means that we have no transparency. However, if I try to decrease this value like this shape will become more and more transparent. To show you how it really works, I'm going to need another shape. All right, let me create another rectangle right here. And as you can see, we have rectangle 3 here, which is placed above rectangle 2 in the layers list. I'm going to bring it down. We'll talk about the layers list and how it works in a few minutes. But for now, I'm going to make sure that this rectangle 2 is placed on top of rectangle 3. And while this rectangle 2 is selected, I'm going to decrease the opacity, and look what happens. You see, now this element is transparent and we can see through it. So that's how the opacity property works. I'm going to get rid of this rectangle 3 and set the opacity to 100%. And then the next property is corner radius. This property allows you to make your elements rounded. Here, as you can see, we have sharp corners. If you want to make your corners rounded, you can just increase this value like that. All right. Alternatively, you can just hover over these areas and you'll see the radius property appears. If I just left click on this node and drag, I can increase the corner radius easily. If I want to modify the corner radius of one corner, what I can do is just hold down the Alt or Option key on my keyboard and just left click and drag. Just like that. If you want to increase the corner radius value incrementally, you can hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, left click and drag. Right next to this property, we have this option as well, which says individual corners. If I just click on it, let's say you want this corner to be sharp. What you can do is set this corner to 0. However, since we flipped this shape, now this corner is changed because we already flipped it. I'm going to flip it once again. And now it's correct. If I want to increase the corner radius of this corner, I can simply left click and scrub. All right, great. Now, if you want to hide an element, what you can do is click on this option. Okay, you can simply hide it. Alternatively, you can head over to the layers list, and as soon as you hover over this layer, you will see these two icons. The lock icon, which allows you to lock this element. So if you want to make sure that you don't accidentally move your layers around or you accidentally select it on the canvas, you can just lock it. If you want to hide it or unhide it, you can just use this icon. The next property we are going to discuss is the fill property, which allows you to change the color of your elements. If I click here, you will see that this window pops up, and here we can pick our desired color. I can simply use this color picker and just change it to whatever I want. I can change the hue here. I can change the opacity here. Remember, the fill property also has its own opacity property, just like what we've discussed here. So you can make your color transparent. Then here we have different color modes. We have hex, RGB, CSS, HSL, HSP, and here you'll see all your saved colors. If you want to pick a color from your canvas, you can use this eyedropper and just choose your desired color on the canvas. Right here at the top, we have this libraries option as well. If you have color styles saved, you'll see all your color styles right here. But what are these options? When it comes to the fill property, we have 4 options here. We have the solid option, which allows you to pick one single color. Then we also have gradient, which is basically a transition from one color to another color. Here, as you can see, we have 2 colors. We can just modify their position like that. We have 2 stops, 0%, 100%. You can adjust the gradient stop position right here. And also you can add more colors here. If I just hit this plus icon, I'll add another stop, and I can simply click on it and adjust the color just like that. And again, you'll have the opacity property here as well. So you can make your colors transparent, but you can also control the direction of your gradient using these handles. As simple as that. If you want to rotate or flip your gradient, you can use these options. Here we have flip gradient. We also have rotate gradient, just like this. We are not limited to only one type of gradient. Currently, we are using the linear gradient, which is the most popular type of gradient, but we also have radial, like this. We have angular, like that. And we also have diamond, which looks like this. But as I said, most of the time we use the linear gradient. The next thing we have here is image. So if I click on this, it allows me to upload an image from my computer, and that image will be placed inside my shape. We'll talk about images later. We can also add a video to our shapes if we use this option. However, this particular option is only available to paid users. Now, the next property we are going to discuss is stroke. Stroke allows you to add borders to your elements. If I just hit this plus button, you will see that now we have this very slim border around our rectangle. All right, you can control the thickness of your border using this property here, just like that. And you can also decide whether this border should be added inside your element, like this, or it should be added outside your element, or it should be placed right at the center. We can also change its color, just like what we've discussed right here. And you can add a gradient to it. You can add an image or video, whatever you like. Now, when it comes to stroke, we also have some advanced options. If I just click on advanced stroke settings, you will see that we have the stroke style here. By default, it's set to solid. You can change it to dash if you want to get a dashed stroke, a dashed border around your shape. And you can change these values here. For example, I can set it to 10. I can set the gap as well. I'm going to set it to 30. You can change the dash cap. Currently, it's set to none. We have square. We have round as well. You can change the join as well. You can set it to bevel or round. Now, if you want to add a border to only one side of your shape, you can use this option. If I just click on it, I can, by default, it's set to all. I can add it to top, I can add it to bottom, I can add it to left, right, or I can use this custom option and just specify it like this. The other thing I'm going to mention here is that you're not limited to only one stroke or one fill. You can add as many colors or as many borders as you like to your element using this plus icon. If I want to add another fill on top of this color, I can hit this plus icon. And as you can see now, we have this dark overlay. I can change it and I can come up with my own color combination. Here I can adjust the transparency of this color. If I just increase it to 100%, you will see that this bottom color is not visible because it's placed right under this top fill. if you want to change the order of these colors, you can hover over this area, and as soon as your cursor's icon changes to this hand icon, you can just left click and just drag it up, just like that. So keep that in mind. The same thing applies to all these properties. Okay, so I can add one more border to this shape, or even more. And now it's time to move on to the next property, which is effects. The effects property, as you can guess from its name, allows you to add some effects to your element. It could be a drop shadow, it could be an inner shadow, layer blur, and background blur. So let's start with the drop shadow. Here, by default, it's set to drop shadow, and if I want to change its properties, I can just click on this option, Effect Settings, and it allows me to change the position, like that, the X and Y coordinates. It allows me to change the blur property. So basically here we can change the blur radius. Then we have the spread property as well, just like that. You can change the color, you can set the opacity here, and that's basically how we add shadows to our elements. But we can also use inner shadows. If I just change it to inner shadow, you will see that now the shadow is placed inside our shape. Most of the time we don't use this option. However, if you want to create some specific effects, for example, glass morphism or something like that, you would need to use the inner shadow. What about these two properties, layer blur and background blur? Well, imagine you want to make this shape blurry. If you want to do that, you can simply add a layer blur property to it and just increase the blur property. Just like that. But what about the background blur? Well, if I set it to background blur, you'll see that nothing happens. Well, that's because in order for this option to work, first we need to have another element placed behind this object. So let me go ahead and add another shape, maybe an ellipse, like that. Left click and drag. I'm going to hold down the Shift key to create a perfect circle. And I'm going to place it right under this rectangle 2 in the layers list. Now I'm going to select this rectangle and I'm going to increase the background blur like that. Again, nothing happens. There is one more thing we need to do to make this work, and that is decreasing the opacity of our fill. Not the appearance, but our fill. So if I just decrease it here to 50% and I just decrease the blur amount here a bit, you'll see that now it works. You see, it allows us to create this kind of glass effect. So that's basically how this option works. Now let me get rid of this effect and just increase the opacity here to 100%. All right. And I'm just going to get rid of this ellipse. And the next option we are going to discuss is the export option. Well, this option allows you to add an export setting to a frame or to any selected element. It could be a frame, it could be a shape, whatever it might be. So here I'm going to select this rectangle and just add an export setting to it. And here we have different properties like the scale. By default, it's set to 1x. You can increase it to 2x. Basically, when it's set to 1x and you export this particular shape, the final dimension of your exported file will be 400 by 500. But if you want to make sure that you'll get a higher quality shape, you can set it to 2x, and then the final file will be much larger. The width will be 800 and the height will be 1000. And then we have different file formats. We have PNG, JPEG, SVG, and PDF. And here we have some advanced options that we are not going to discuss. And finally, you can preview what you're exporting and hit export to export that file. So that's basically the general properties each element has in Figma. We have position, layout, appearance, fill, stroke, effects, and export. However, keep in mind that some elements have their own unique properties that we are going to discuss in a second. Alright, now that you're familiar with the properties you can modify for each shape, let's head over to the next shape right here, which is going to be line. So to create a simple line, you can just select this line tool, left click and drag. If you want to create a straight line, you can hold down the Shift key on your keyboard. If you don't, you can freely create a line just like this. And as you can see, the rotation property will be changed. If I set it to 0, again, it will be straight. So a line is essentially a stroke. By default, there is no fill. And here, as you can see, we have this stroke. If you want to change the color of your line, you can simply change it right here. If you want to change the thickness, just like what we've discussed, You can change the thickness here, but we also have access to these two additional options. Okay, we can change the styling of our line. For example, if you want to create a line arrow, you can use this option, a triangle arrow, reverse triangle, circle arrow, diamond arrow, round, and square. Let's say you want to create a line arrow. You can use this option. You can also set the endpoint to line arrow as well, and you will get such a line. So that's basically how lines work. Quite simple, isn't it? What about the next shape? The next shape is arrow. Arrow is basically a stroke if I just create an arrow, but by default, the endpoint is set to line arrow. Nothing different. What about the next one, which is ellipse? If you hold down the shift key on your keyboard, left click and drag, you can create a perfect circle. However, this shape has its own unique properties as well. If I hover over this node right here, you'll see it says arc. If I left click and drag, I'll get access to other properties here, and I can specify different values. For example, I can change the start point like this. I can change these values, sweep, and ratio. These properties are quite helpful when you want to create charts, for example. So if I just increase the ratio, let's set it to 30, you can create such a shape. I can easily adjust the ratio here as well. I can change the sweep amount. I can change the starting point just like that. But we can also make it rounded. We can increase the corner radius here. Let me set it to 30. And as you can see, it will be rounded. So that's how you can create an ellipse. And the next shape is polygon. Let me just hold down the shift key on my keyboard and draw a perfect triangle. And here we have this new property, which is called count. The minimum number you can set for this object is 3, but you can increase it as much as you want, just like this. You can also control this property right here. You can increase it or decrease it and change the radius as well if you want to make it smoother. Now the next shape tool we are going to discuss is star. So if you want to create a star, you can use this shape tool. And here we have different properties as well, such as count and also ratio. I can make it rounded. I'm going to set it to 24 and just change the ratio. Now the last thing we are going to discuss here is the image video option. If you want to import an image or let's say images to your project, you can simply use this option. Alternatively, you can just drag and drop them into your Figma file. Keep in mind that you should not drag and drop your images into your Figma dashboard. It won't work. It should be imported to your Figma file right here. Okay, so using this option, I can simply select one image. And as soon as I do that, I'll get the option to place the image wherever I want. I can just left click somewhere and the image will be placed right here. The other thing we can do is just select the image, then left click and drag to specify its dimension. That's the other thing you can do. Or if you want to add this image to a shape, you can just select it and then just hover over any shape. It could be this one, this one, this one, and just left click. And that image will be placed inside your shape. If you want to add multiple images simultaneously, you can select them all, just like that. And then you can just left click one by one, and they will be placed here. Or you could just select them. Let me show you. You can left click and drag to define their dimensions one by one, like that. But as you may remember, I also showed you another way of adding images to your shapes. Yes, you're right. You can use the fill property. So let's say, let me create another frame here. Let's say you have a rectangle. Okay, I'm going to draw a rectangle here and you want to add an image to it. What you can do is head over to fill and from here, choose image and upload from computer. And let's just pick this image. And this image is now placed inside your shape. If you want to crop your image, you can use this option. By default, it's set to fill, which means that if I try to resize this shape, the image will try to fill this shape. However, if I set it to fit, now we'll be able to see the complete image inside. And now if I try to resize it, we still see the complete image. If I set it to crop, I can simply crop this image, just like this. And I can move the image around as well. Just keep that in mind. And if I hit enter, I can confirm that the crop looks good. We also have tile, which allows us to create a pattern, but most of the time we don't use it, so we are not going to discuss that. And as you may remember, you can modify these settings as well, such as exposure, contrast, saturation, temperature, tint, highlights, and shadow. Now I have a question. We've discussed all these shape tools, but what if you want to create something custom? Let's say you want to create something that's not included in these shape tools. Well, I have good news for you. These shapes are all vectors. What does it mean? It means that these shapes are constructed by nodes, so you can easily customize them. So here, I'm going to create a rectangle. Let me just simply draw a rectangle. And let's say you want to customize it. While it's selected, I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard. And as soon as I do that, we'll enter another environment, okay? Here we'll see all the nodes that this shape is constructed with. And we can simply left click on one of them and just drag it around to create something custom. We can also make this corner rounded if you want to, just like this. But let's say 4 nodes are not enough for the shape we have in mind. Well, don't worry, we can simply hover over these lines and we can add more nodes to this shape to make it even more customized. If I just add one more node here, just left click and drag, I can create something like this. Okay, so I'm going to hit Ctrl Z or Command Z. And you know what? Let's create something fun. Let's create a bookmark icon here. To do that, we can simply add a node right at the bottom, left click, hold down the Shift key and move it up. Just like this. And now we have this bookmark icon. But let's say you want to make it completely rounded. What we can do is select all these nodes and just make it rounded. And once you're done with the customization, you can hit enter to confirm. The other tool you can use to create custom shapes is the pen tool. Here, as you can see, we have the pen and pencil tool. I'm going to select the pen tool. Let me get rid of this shape. I'm going to remove it. To use this pen tool, you can simply left click to add a node, just like that. And then you can move around and left click once again. And now you've just created a simple line. If you want to have some curvature, you can left click and drag simultaneously. It's so important. And you can create such a curve, just like this. And if I want to close this path, I can just connect this node to our first node. And this shape is now closed. And now what I can do is just click on this option, close, and I can add a fill to it, just like this. And I can get rid of the stroke. We don't need that. And here is our custom shape. The possibilities are endless. You can just create any shape you want using these tools. And the pencil tool works similarly. All right, the next tool we are going to discuss is the text tool, which is one of the most important tools in Figma, because as designers, we need to use text all the time. The shortcut for the text tool is T, and to create a text, you can simply left click here and just start typing. I'm going to type welcome back. Just like that. I'm going to hit Ctrl A or Command A to select the text. And right here, apart from all the properties we've discussed before, we have access to a few additional properties for this text element. Here we have this typography section, which allows us to modify the typeface or font, let's say. Here you have access to free Google fonts. You can also use your own custom fonts, but for now we are going to use these Google fonts and you can change it easily. Let me change that to Plus Jakarta Sans. There it is. Then we can modify other properties like weight, the font size, etc. I'm going to make it semi-bold, change the font size to 40. We can also change the line height, the letter spacing, the alignment, but also we have access to these type settings, these advanced type settings, such as decoration, like this. We can change the case property here, like that. We can use these advanced settings like vertical trim, list style, paragraph spacing, etc. But we are not going to discuss them as they are more advanced and it's not needed at this stage. Now, when it comes to text layers, you need to keep in mind that we have 3 types of text layers. Here under the layout section, you see by default it's set to auto width, which means that if I keep typing something here, the width of this text element will increase. Okay, let me change the letter spacing here a bit. And also I'm going to change it to none here. But we also have this option, auto height. If I set it to auto height, look what happens if I continue typing something here. You see that now the width is fixed, but the height grows. The next option we have is this one, fixed size. If I set it to fixed size, the boundary of this text layer will be fixed, which means that if I just copy this text and paste it here, look what happens. The size is intact. Most of the time we use auto width or auto height. So keep that in mind, it's so important. All right, now that you're familiar with these tools, let's talk about layers basics. But before we do that, I'm going to quickly show you how you can learn more about these properties if you're completely new to Figma. Let me create a shape here, for example, a rectangle. And we already discussed these properties, right? But these properties don't have any labels. For example, here we have width, here we have opacity, but we cannot see any labels for these values. Well, what you can do is head over to this percentage drop-down menu, just click on it. From here, you can turn on property labels. And as soon as you do that, you will see that these labels appear on top of these values. And this way you can master how these properties work and what they mean essentially. All right. But for now, I'm just gonna turn it off and let's get rid of this shape. And what I'm gonna do is head over to the dashboard. And from here, I'm gonna head over to the community right here. And I'm just gonna look for a landing page, basically a ready-made project so we can discuss the layers basics. So here, I'm just gonna look for landing page. You can look for an app or a UI kit, whatever you like. But I think a landing page would work. I'm going to go with this one. Let's click on it. And then to use this landing page as our template, I'm going to click on Open in Figma and I'll be taken to this project. Here, as you can see, we have different pages. We have cover, we have desktop, phone style, components. That's basically how the designer structured this project. We don't need to see the cover. We are going to head over to desktop, phone, and style. And here we have different frames. We have the style frame where we see all our text styles and color styles. We also have the home landing page. That's what we need for this section of this video. So here, if I select this home frame in the layers list, you see that we have this frame and we see this frame icon right next to it. And inside, you'll see that we have many other elements. We have footer block, contact block, testimonials, we have this button, group of cards, CTA block, and each of these elements has its own unique icon. Because in Figma, each element is represented by a unique icon. For example, here is the frame icon. These are the auto layout icons, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. And then again, we have a frame. Here we have an instance of a component. We'll talk about components as well. Then here we have a group, so we can quickly understand that here we have a group of elements. And if I select any of these text elements, for example, this one, you will see that the text element has its unique icon as well. All right, now let's talk about the order of layers. Well, when it comes to layers, the order of your elements matters. Why? Because depending on how you organize your elements in the layers list, the visibility of your elements changes. What do I mean by that? Well, let's select this section, for example, services block, okay? If I just try to move it up like that, you'll see that now it covers part of this section. We no longer see this button, book a consultation, right? And the reason for that is that this particular element, services block, is placed on top of this landing page frame. You see, we have this services frame, then we have this landing page frame. And since it's placed on top of that, part of this frame is not visible. Now, if I want to make sure that this section, this services section, is placed behind this landing page, what we need to do is just select it in the layers list or here on the canvas, then left click and drag it down like this and place it right under the landing page. You see that? Now, this particular section is behind our hero section or this landing page section. So that's why the order of elements matters in Figma or any other design tools. Now, the other important thing about the layers list is that you can easily rename your layers. If you want to rename your layers or frames, what you can do is just double click on its name and try to modify it like that. I'm going to rename it to hero section and hit enter. Now, what if you want to place an element inside another element? For example, you may want to put this frame inside this frame. In that case, you need to drag it and then hover over this frame. And as you can see now it's highlighted, and then just drop it. And now this hero section is inside this services block section. All right, I'm gonna hit Control Z or Command Z to undo the operation. The other thing we are gonna discuss now is how you can select a particular element on the canvas. Well, here, if I select this frame, you'll see that this main frame landing page is selected, right? But what if you wanna select an element inside this parent frame? In that case, you can either head over to the layers list and just look for your desired element and then select it, for example, this text, this heading, or you can just double click a few times until you reach your desired element. But a more efficient way for selecting an element inside another element is to just hold down the Command or Control key on your keyboard, hover over the element you want to select, and as soon as it's highlighted, you can just left click. And there it is. Now this heading is selected. Let's say we want to select this particular shape inside this illustration. What we can do is hold down the Control or Command key, and now since I'm hovering over it, it's highlighted, and if I just click on it, it will be selected. Alright, now that you know how layers work in Figma, let's start talking about Boolean operations. What are Boolean operations? Well, imagine you want to create a custom icon. I'm going to hit A on my keyboard and just draw a simple frame. And here, I'm going to create a few circles. Hold down the Shift key, left click and drag like that to create a perfect circle, and just change its color to something else, maybe blue. Then I'm going to duplicate it, hit Control D or Command D, just like that, and bring it here. Now we have two circles overlapping each other, right? If I select them both and I head over to the Design Inspector and I click on this icon, I'll see these four operations: union selection, subtract selection, intersect selection, and exclude selection, okay? These are the four formulas we can use to combine different elements and create unified shapes. So let me show you how it works. Before I use them, I'm gonna select these two, duplicate them, move them to the right, duplicate them once again, and once again. There it is. Now I'm going to select them both. Remember, to be able to use the Boolean operations, you need to select at least two elements on the canvas. So here, while these two elements are selected, I'm going to use union selection. As soon as I do that, you may say, well, nothing happened. Well, if you take a look at the layers list, now you see that these two circles are combined into one shape. We have union, and you can obviously rename it. And if I try to change its color, look what happens. You see, now the color of both circles changes. But what if you want to modify this shape? You can do that. You can just easily click on this arrow icon, just like that, to expand this union group, and then just select any of these layers, any of these circles, and just modify that. You can make it smaller like this. You can make it bigger. You can just move it around, just like that. However, you cannot change its color, because when you use this union operation, your elements cannot have multiple colors. Therefore, if I just try to change the color of this circle, nothing happens. You see? That's because their parent element, which is this union group, has a different color. So that's basically how the union operation works. The other operation is subtract. So here, if I click on subtract selection, you see one element is subtracted from the other, and we can still customize it. If we just expand this group, we can just select this element and move it around. What about the next formula? I'm going to select these two, and from here, I'm going to choose intersect. So as you can see now, the overlapping section of those two circles is intact, but the rest of the shapes is gone. And now I'm going to select these two, and I'm going to choose exclude selection. And here we have the opposite of intersect. So basically the overlapping part has been removed from these two circles, and we have a hole inside. So let's say you want to create an eye icon. In that case, here we can just select this shape that we just created, rotate it. I'm going to hold down the Shift key on my keyboard and rotate it just like that. Let me zoom in. Then I'm going to draw another circle right here in the center. And you know what to do. We just need to select them both. And from here, we just need to select subtract selection. So as you can see, Boolean operations allow you to combine different shapes into a unified shape. And it's quite useful when you're trying to create different icons, for instance. Now you might ask, Well, how can we ungroup these shapes? In that case, you can just select your desired element, right click on it, and click on ungroup. And there we go. Now we have two separate shapes. Alright, so far so good. Now that you're familiar with Boolean operations, let's start discussing more advanced features like auto layout. Let's say you want to design a simple button, for example, a sign-in button. How can you do that? Alright, so here I am inside the file that we initially created, our own file. And you might say to create a button, we can simply draw a rectangle, just like this. Then just add a text element inside, like that. We can make it a bit larger, maybe bold, and we can place this text right in the middle. Well, we can do that. Of course, we can just select them both and then group them as well. To group elements, you can hit Ctrl G or Command G. And now we have a group of elements and we can move it around, we can resize it. However, this is not a good method for creating a button. Why? Because let's say you design this button. Let me just select this rectangle, make it a bit smaller, okay? And then I'm gonna select this text, align it to the center, all right. And I can even make it rounded, and let's change the color. I'm gonna change it to, let's say, blue, all right. And I'm gonna select the text, and it's gonna be dark blue. I'm gonna select this blue and make it a bit darker, okay? So here is our sign-in button. Now let's say we need another button, maybe get us started or sign up. I'm going to rename it to sign in. You might say, all right, we can just select it, duplicate it, hit Ctrl D or Command D, bring it down, and just change the text. Well, look what happens when I do that. I'm going to type get us started. You see that? We have an issue. Our button is not responsive. So the width is not determined by the text inside, by the content inside. Well, how can we resolve this issue? That's where auto layout comes in. Auto layout allows you to turn your elements into responsive frames. Let me show you how it works. So instead of creating the button this way, we can just create a text and just type sign in. Then while this text is selected, we can just add auto layout to it. To do that, we can just hit Shift and A like that. And now as you can see, the icon has changed and it indicates that now we have an auto layout frame. And this text is inside this frame. Let me rename it to button, like that. And now we can go ahead and style this button. So while this button frame is selected, we can just add a fill to it and change its color to something else, maybe this blue. Then I'm gonna select this text and just change its color to this dark blue as well, like that. And now if I select this button, you can see that now we have this new section called auto layout and we have all these properties that we are going to discuss. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make it rounded like this button. Let me just increase the corner radius to 8. We can set it to 4, something like that. And now if I try to change the text, look what happens. I'm going to change it to get us started. You see that? Now our button is responsive. So basically, since we have an auto layout frame, the width of our element is now determined by the content inside. That's so cool, isn't it? Now let's discuss all these properties here. Here we have the resizing options. We have hog content, fixed width. We have hog content, fixed height. We have these add min height, add max height, all these properties. We are not going to discuss all of them right now because I have another comprehensive video about auto layout. So if you want to master auto layout and how it works, make sure to check out that video. But for now, let's discuss these simple and basic properties like the direction. Well, when it comes to the direction of auto layout, we have 3 options. We have vertical, we have horizontal, and we have wrap. Okay, Figma automatically determines which direction works better for a particular layout. In this case, it automatically set it to horizontal, but we can change it to vertical as well and nothing happens. The reason is here we have only one element inside this frame. If I just select this text and duplicate it, and then I select this button frame and just change the direction, look what happens. Now we have a vertical stack of elements. So that's basically how this direction works. Let me show you another example quickly. I'm gonna create a few shapes, okay, like this, maybe a square as well, and a star like this, okay? Now I'm going to select them all and I'm going to place them inside an auto layout frame. To do that, you know what to do, just hit Shift and A like that, and now they are neatly organized inside this auto layout frame. We already discussed these two directions. We have vertical, horizontal, but what about this one? Let me add a field to this frame and just change it to black like that. And then let's see how this option works, wrap. If I try to resize this frame's width, look what happens. The elements are intact, they don't move. But look what happens when I set it to wrap. Now I'm going to resize it. You see that? So basically now the frame is wrapping the content inside. And it's quite helpful when it comes to creating responsive design. Obviously, we are not going to go through many examples in this video, but keep in mind that this option exists and it's going to save you so much time when it comes to making your elements responsive. All right, good. Now let's discuss the other properties. Here we have the horizontal gap between the elements inside. Basically, using this value, you can define the spacing between the elements inside your auto layout frame. Currently it's set to 10. You can simply increase it like that. However, since we resized our frame, now we have a fixed width here. We are going to change it back to hog content, which means that the main frame is hogging the content inside. And if we change the spacing inside, the frame's width will change as well, like that. So that's basically how the hog option works. Instead of having a fixed width, we have a relative and responsive width. Well, these two properties allow us to specify the horizontal and vertical padding inside our frame. Okay, currently they are both set to 0. That's why we have no padding around our elements. If you want to have some empty space around your element, you need to change these properties like that. I'm going to set it to 8 and 8. You can also define an individual value for each side using this option. Now let's get back to our button here. I'm going to select it and I'm going to set the horizontal spacing to 16 and the vertical spacing could be 8. Now our button looks good. The width is set to hog. The height is set to hog as well. That's why our button is responsive. If we set it to fixed, again, it won't be responsive. Look what happens. You see that? So keep that in mind that in order for our button to be responsive, the resizing option should be set to hog. Right next to these properties, we have this alignment option as well, which allows us to align the elements inside our frame. If I set it to left, nothing happens here. You know why? Because here the width is set to hog content and we also have only one element inside. If I change the resizing option here, for example, I set it to fixed width and I just make this bigger, currently the text is aligned right to the center. But if I want to align it to the left, I can easily change it. So that's how the alignment option works. Now that you learned about auto layout, let's start talking about components. What are components? Well, in simple words, components are reusable elements. Whenever you want to create an element once and reuse it multiple times across your project, you can create a component. So let me show you how it works. Imagine you've created this button, all right, and you want to reuse it across your project, maybe on the home page, on the contact us page, on the sign up page, etc. So what you can do is this. Let's say we have another frame. I'm going to hit A on my keyboard to select the frame tool. And from here, I'm just going to choose iPhone 16. There it is. And I'm just going to duplicate it a few times. Hit Control D or Command D. Okay. Now I'm going to select this button and I'm going to bring it down here. All right, nice. Obviously, we need to make it a bit bigger because currently the height is set to 35. It's not optimal, so I'm just going to set it to 44. And now let's say you want to reuse this button on all these other frames. How can you do that? Well, you might say we can just select it, duplicate it, and bring it right here, duplicate it once again, just like that, and we can go ahead and change the text. Well, of course you can do that. However, imagine you want to make a change to all these buttons simultaneously. How can you do that? Well, one way is to just select them all like this and then make a change. For instance, if you want to change their color, you can head over to the field section and from here you can just change it to whatever you want. However, you need to select them all. But what if you have many different pages, like hundreds of different pages, and on each page you will have one or many buttons like this, and you want to change them all, whether you want to change their color, their size, their corner radius, etc. In that case, it would be too time consuming to just go ahead and select them all and change all those properties. So essentially what we need is a component. And components allow us to make a change once, and the change will be applied to all the instances of that component. Let me show you how it works. I'm going to hit Ctrl-Z or Command-Z, like that. And then I'm just going to get rid of all these buttons. And right here, we have this Get Started button, and it's named button, right? To turn it into a component, while it's selected, we need to head over to the Design Inspector right here, and we need to click on this button, Create Component. As soon as I do that, the boundaries turn purple, and it turns purple right here in the layers list as well. The icons change too. Now we have this unique icon which represents a component. Before I show you how you can create instances of your component, let me show you where this component is saved. If you head over to the Assets tab right here, if I just click on it, it says we have this button component. And to create an instance of it, essentially a copy of it, you can just simply drag and drop it right here. And if I head over to the layers list, now you see that this one is an instance of our main component. And you can see that its icon is different. This icon represents an instance of a component, but this one represents the main component. So what's the difference between the two? Well, essentially the main component, or let's say the master component, is the parent of the instances. For instance, this parent can dictate to its children how they should behave and look. Well, let's say we have many instances of this button. I'm going to bring this instance right here. I'm going to duplicate it. And let's duplicate it once again. I'm going to bring it down here. Okay. Let's say we want to change their color all at once. Well, we don't need to select all these instances. Instead, we can just select the parent or the master component and just make the change here. I'm going to change it to, let's say, red. And as you can see now, all the instances of this particular master component have been changed. And that's how components work. So essentially, all these instances are linked to the master component. But what if for some reason you want to make a change only to one instance of this particular master component? Well, in that case, you can select that particular instance and just change its color. And when we do that, look what happens. Now we made the change to this particular instance, and the other instances are intact. So if I just go ahead and select the master component and just change the color, you see the field property, or let's say the color property of this instance, is no longer linked to our master component because we already changed it here. However, all other properties are still linked. For instance, let me just change the color. Let's say we want to change the corner radius. If I just increase the corner radius here, this instance should be changed as well. Look, you see? One thing you need to keep in mind is that you should never remove the master component. All right, if I just select this master component and I remove it, it's gone forever. If you head over to the assets, it's no longer there. Okay, so make sure not to remove your master component. Now, the other thing I'm going to mention here is how you can detach an instance from the master component. And it's so simple. You can just select this button and head over to the Design Inspector. And from here, just click on Detach Instance right here. And as soon as I do that, you see that the icon has changed and also it's no longer purple, which means that now we have a simple auto layout frame instead of an instance of a component. Okay? And this particular button is no longer linked to this master component. So if I just go ahead and change its corner radius now, you see it's intact. There are other things about components that we are not going to discuss in this video as they are more advanced, such as component properties. As you can see here, we can add component properties to this master component, but we'll cover this topic in a separate dedicated video as it's more advanced and we are not going to discuss all the advanced features in this video. While we are talking about components, I'm going to mention another important feature, which is variants. So here we have this master component, right? I'm going to bring it down. Let's say we want to have different variants of this particular component. For example, when it comes to buttons, we usually have different states like default, hover, clicked, etc. So how can we create different variations of this particular component? It's so simple. First, you need to select your master component, head over to the design panel, and from here, just click on add variant. And as soon as I do that, as you can see, this new frame is created around these two components and their icons changed. Why? Because now these are variants. Here we just created a component set, and inside this component set, we have two variants. Okay, so here the first variant is named default. I'm going to select this one, and if I just double click on it, you'll see that it says property 1 equals variant 2. I'm just going to change this part, and I'm going to change it to hover. And while this hover variant is selected, I'm going to make a change. For instance, I'm going to change its color a bit. Now I'm going to select this and I'm going to duplicate it. I can either hit Ctrl D or Command D, or I can click on this plus icon to add a variant, just like that. And we have the third variant, and I'm going to change this part to pressed, like that. And now we have three different variants. So while this pressed variant is selected, I'm going to make it a bit darker. Of course, we can change the text color as well, but for now, I'm going to leave it as is. Okay, so how can we use this component set? Well, now, if we select this button, which is an instance of our master component, you'll see right here that we have this property. It's called property 1. And we have this drop down menu, and inside we have three different variants: default, hover, and pressed. So we can basically switch between different variants of this particular component. That's so cool, isn't it? But how can we change this property name? It's so simple. We just need to select our component set, and here we can just click property 1 and just change it to state, like that. And now, instead of property 1, we have this state property, just like that. All right, the next thing we are going to talk about is Figma plugins. What are plugins? Well, essentially, plugins are third-party applications created by the community that extend the editor's functionality. So let me show you how it works. Imagine you're looking for a few images for your project. What you can do is just go ahead and Google it, find some websites with royalty-free images, download the images, and import them to your Figma project. That's one way, but the other way, and the most efficient way, is to just head over to this option, Actions, and from here, head over to the Plugins and Widgets tab, and just look for the Unsplash plugin. You can find thousands of different useful plugins in the community, but here I'm just going to show you how plugins work. But we are not going to check out every single plugin that exists. All right, so here I'm just going to look for Unsplash. For those of you who are not familiar with the Unsplash website, it's basically a website that provides you with royalty-free images that you can use in your projects for free. And here is its plugin, its official plugin. I'm going to run it. All right, this window pops up, and here is where you can just go ahead and look for your desired image. You can head over to the presets tab, and you can choose from one of these categories, for example, portrait, or you can just head over to the search and just type in what you're looking for. For example, let's say 3D product. I'm going to hit search, and there it is. We have many 3D products that we can use. For example, this one. Some of them are paid, but most of them are free. Let's see what we can use. Maybe this one. It looks good. I'm going to click on it, and it will be placed inside our canvas. And now we can easily move it around, edit it, and do whatever we want. And remember, you can use this photo for free because these are royalty-free images. What about other plugins? As I mentioned, you can find many useful plugins in the community. But for now, let's check out a few other plugins. Here we have HTML to Design. This plugin allows you to turn any website to a Figma design file. So here, if you just run this plugin and just type apple.com and hit import, it will import the Apple's website right here. Let me show you how it works. And it's not going to be just a static image. It will add every single layer that's been used for this particular project. Here, inside this frame, you see we have section, and inside this section, we have background, we have all the layers, and we can just select them, move them around. we can change their properties, etc. And this plugin is quite helpful if you're trying to get into UI design and you just want to learn how other designers structure their website. If you want to learn from big companies like Apple, Google, Meta, etc., you can use this plugin to learn how to structure your design, how to use colors, typography, etc. All right, now let me get rid of this section that it just created. What about other plugins? Well, here we have this arc plugin, which allows you to bend your text layers. It's quite fun to check out different plugins. However, first we need to add a text layer. I'm just gonna type welcome. I'm just gonna copy it and just paste it a few times like this. Now, while this text layer is selected, I'm gonna run this arc bend your type plugin, and there it is. We can basically change these values until we are satisfied with the result. So here I'm gonna hit apply, and there it is. Now the next thing we are gonna discuss is layout grids. What are layout grids? Well, layout grids help us align different objects within a frame. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm gonna head over to this project, and here if I select this home page, you will see that we have this layout grid section. The designer used a grid here, which is hidden, but if I click on this eye icon, I can just unhide it, and you will see these vertical lines. Basically, now we have 12 columns. Here, as you can see, we have a column grid. We have 3 different types of grids in Figma. We have grid, like that. We have columns grid, like that. And we have rows, like this. Okay, usually we use column grids, and if you want to adjust the preferences of this grid, you can just click on this icon. But for now, let me show you how you can add a grid to your frame. Well, let's say we have a frame. I'm just going to draw a frame here, and we want to add a layout grid to it. To do that, while this frame is selected, you can just head over to the layout grid section and just hit this plus icon. And just like that, you can add a layout grid to your frame. You can change the type of grid, and then you can just modify the preferences here. So now let me just select this home page again and just click on this icon, layout grid settings. Again, here you can change the type of grid. Then here we have this property called count, which allows you to define the number of columns you want to get here. Usually for the desktop version of a website, we use a 12 column grid, but you can change it to whatever you want. You can change it to 16, you can change it to 8, whatever you like. You can also change the color, you can change the type. Currently we have this stretch type, we have left. Basically using this option, you can align your layout grid to the left side. You can align it to the right, align it to the center, or set it to stretch. When you set the type to stretch, the width will be disabled because the width is determined automatically based on these 2 values, margin and gutter. So here, if I select this home frame and I try to resize it like this, you see that the width of our layout grid changes. That's because the type is set to stretch. And now let me show you what these 2 properties are, margin and gutter. What do they do? Well, here the margin property defines the margin on the sides of this layout grid. Currently it's set to 100, which means that on the left side and on the right side, we have a 100 pixel margin. If I just increase that to, let's say, 150, look what happens. Now we have more empty space on the sides. But what about the gutter? The gutter defines the spacing between these columns. So if I set it to 32, you see, now we have a narrower gap. If I set it to 60, now we have a wider gap between these columns. So that's basically how the layout grid works. Again, if you want to master how the grid works, I have a dedicated video about that on my channel. Make sure to go ahead and check that out. The next thing we are going to discuss is prototyping, how you can make your design interactive. To do that, I'm just going to head over to the community and just look for a mobile application project, okay? So from here, I'm just going to look for mobile apps. All right, we have many different options to choose from. Let's see what we can find. I like this one. I'm just going to open it up. Hit open in Figma. Cool. Let's head over to design. And here, as you can see, we have different pages, right? We have the splash screen, we have onboarding, we have sign in, and here we have the home page, we have the product detail, etc. So let's make these pages interactive. Let's say we want to make this card clickable. So when the user clicks on this Apple card, he or she will be taken to this page. How can we do that? It's so simple. First, we need to select the element we want to use as our trigger, which is going to be this card, okay? So I'm going to select it. Then I'm going to head over to the prototype tab right here. And as soon as I select this tab, I can just create a connection between these two pages. Here, if I hover over this blue boundary, you'll see this plus icon appears. I'm going to left click and drag and just connect it to our next page. And as soon as I do that, this window pops up. Here, as you can see, we need to specify the trigger, the action, destination, and the animation. So the trigger by default is set to on click, which means that this card will be clickable. That's good. We have other triggers like on drag, while hovering, while pressing, mouse enter, etc. We are not going to discuss this because I have many different videos about prototyping on my channel. So if you want to master prototyping in Figma, make sure to check out my other videos. For now, I'm going to leave it as is. And the action is going to be navigate to because we want to transition from one page to another. But we have other types of actions like back, scroll to, open link, etc. Let's leave it as is. And the destination is going to be our product detail page. Okay, so this page, home screen, is our starting point, and this product detail page is going to be our destination. Nice. Now, as you can see here, we have this flow. If I just click on this icon, this window pops up. And now if I hover over this, you see that my cursor changes to this hand icon, indicating that this is clickable now. So if I click on it, I'll be taken to the destination page, which is this product detail page. However, here the transition was instant because we didn't set an animation for it. But now if I just click on this arrow line, I can change the animation from instant to smart animate or move in, move out, etc. I'm gonna set it to smart animate like that, and I'm gonna play it once again, click here, and now we have this fading animation. Of course, we can make it much better than this, but I just wanted to show you how simple it is to create a prototype in Figma super fast. All right, now that you're familiar with prototyping in Figma, let me show you how you can make your components interactive. And as you remember, we created this component set, this button component set, but our button is not interactive, right? So here, if I just draw a simple frame, and I just drag and drop an instance of our button, and I select this frame and I preview it here, like this. Obviously, it's not a mobile frame, but that's fine. If I just hover over it, nothing happens because we didn't make these variants interactive. So how can we do that? Well, it's so simple. If you just head over to this component set and we select our default variant, and then we head over to the prototype tab here, we can just connect this first variant to our hover variant like that. And we are going to set the trigger to while hovering, and the animation is going to be smart animate. You can set the duration here as well. I'm going to leave it as is. And then I'm going to select this hover variant and just connect it to our pressed variant. And this time the trigger is going to be on tap like that. And it should be smart animate. Nice. And now I'm going to select this frame 3, hit shift and spacebar. And if I hover over this button, look what happens. You see, now it's interactive. Now if I click on it, we'll see the press button. Of course, we need to set the animation in a different way to make it work. However, I just wanted to show you how you can make your components interactive in Figma. All right, now let's say you're done with your project and you want to share it with your client or your other team members. How can you do that? Well, there are two things you can do. You can either download the Figma file and save it as a local copy on your computer and just share it with your client or your team members, and then they can just import it to their Figma account. And the way you can do that is just head over to this menu, and from here you can just click on save local copy. However, there is a better and more efficient way for sharing your projects with others, and that is using the share button right here. If I click on this share button, I can invite others by name or email to this project, and basically I can collaborate with other people. Alternatively, I can just copy the project link and just share it with others, and then they can just join this project. But in order for them to be able to edit your file, you need to move your draft to your projects, and you can easily do that using this button. Alright, now that you know how you can share your project with others, let's see how you can ask for feedback. Let's say you already shared your project with other team members, or maybe the project manager, and they want to give you some feedback. To do that, they can simply click on this icon, comment, and let's say they want to comment on this button. Okay, they can just left click here. For example, they could say this button could use a darker shade of green, and then they can submit it. You can head over to the comments here and just write a reply. I'm going to type done and hit submit like that. And once the issue is resolved, you can just click on this mark as resolved icon like that, and it will be gone. The next thing we are going to discuss is constraints. So what are constraints? Let me draw a simple frame right here, and inside this frame I'm going to draw a simple shape. Okay, maybe a circle. Let me hold down the shift key and draw a simple circle right in the middle, and I'm going to change its color. Okay, can you see these blue dashed lines? These are called constraints. So essentially constraints allow us to tell Figma how our elements, or let's say how our layers, should behave in terms of positioning and sizing when we start resizing their parent element. In this case, the parent element is this frame 6. Let me just rename it to frame. And this circle is the child of this parent frame. So now, as you can see, the constraints are set to top and left. We have many different options. We have right, left and right, center, scale, and the same things for the vertical constraints. All right, so let me show you how it works. When the constraints are set to top and left, it means that when we start resizing this parent frame, Figma maintains this layer's position relative to the top and left edges. Okay, so if I start resizing this frame, look what happens. You see, this element stays where it is, and it's not moving because the constraints are set to top and left. If I set it to top and right, look what happens now. If I start resizing this frame, you see now it starts moving because now Figma is maintaining this element's position relative to the top and right edges of this frame. Okay, so that's how constraints work. Let's say you want this element to be aligned right at the center of this frame, and you want it to stay at the center when you start resizing the parent element. You can just align it to the center like this, and as you can see, the constraints are automatically set for you. And now if we try to resize the parent frame, look what happens. You see now this circle stays right at the center no matter the parent's dimensions. But apart from center, right, left, and top, we also have left and right and scale. Let me show you how these two options work. Here, if I set it to left and right, look what happens when I resize this frame. You see, now this element is stretching. But we also have another option called scale. It works similarly to the left and right with a small difference. Let me show you. If I set it to scale and I try to resize it, this element is still stretching. However, Figma will convert all the values like the left and right margins here to a percentage value. So instead of having pixel values, we are working with percentage values. Now let me show you how you can actually use these constraints when you're working on a project. So here we have this mobile application, and if I just select this explore frame and I try to resize it, if I try to increase its height, you see that the tab bar here stays where it is and it's not sticking to the bottom edge of this frame. Okay, so what we need to do is select this tab bar, and as you can see, the constraints are set to left and top. So if we just set it to left and bottom, now if we try to resize this frame, this tab bar should stick to the bottom edge of this frame. Look what happens. You see that? It works perfectly. Constraints are quite powerful, and we can combine them with auto layout to create fully responsive layouts in Figma. The next topic we are going to discuss is AI tools. If you head over to the toolbar right at the bottom and you see this icon for your actions panel, it means that you've been granted access to Figma AI tools. If not, if you're seeing another icon, it means that you don't have access to AI tools yet, because AI tools are not available to all users. So let's see what tools we have here. I'm going to open it up. Here is our actions panel, and right here you see we have a few design tools, we have a few writing tools and image editing tools, okay? Here under the design tools, we have rename layers, first draft, add interactions. So what do they do? This one, rename layers, renames your layers automatically in seconds. And I'm sure you know that many designers, including me, are guilty of not naming our layers properly when we go through the design process. And this option saves us so much time. So let me show you how it works. Here, what I'm gonna do is select these frames, okay, maybe this one, and I'm gonna click on rename layers, okay? And as soon as I do that, it starts renaming all these layers inside this frame automatically. That's so cool, isn't it? Make sure to give it a try. What about the next option? The next option we have here is first draft. Okay, so this feature lets you turn your ideas into ready wireframes or high fidelity designs in seconds. Let me show you how it works. Here right at the top, you see we have a few libraries, okay? We have basic app components, we have app wireframe, basic site, and site wireframes, okay? Depending on your needs, you can choose from one of these libraries, okay? Let's say you want to create a basic app and you have no idea how it should look in terms of layout. So what you can do is choose this basic app library, and then you can just describe what you're looking for. You can type in whatever you like. Let's say you want to design a fitness app. So here, I'm going to type an app for a fitness company. Okay? Then I'm going to hit make it, and then Figma will do its magic. You see, now more and more elements are being added to this frame. All right, it's done. Let's check it out. Here at the top, we have this heading, then we have this large picture, which has been generated by AI. And then we have a heading, we have the subtitle, we have this description, we have a few icons, then we have a few buttons, and finally we have this tab bar. It's not perfect, but it gives us an idea of how we can create a layout for this app, okay? If you're not satisfied with the color palettes, you can choose one of these. For example, this one, or this one, just like that. Then you can hit make changes, and you can also change the styling of your elements. For example, here, if you want your elements to be sharp, you can just decrease that. If you want them to be completely rounded, you can increase that, just like that. You see that these buttons are now rounded as well. Then here you can define the spacing, whether you want to have more white space around your content or not, depending on the use case. And finally, here you can change the font, just like that. Okay, so that's basically how this option works. And as I showed you, here we have many other options. For example, if you want to design a website, you can choose basic site, and then you can just type a landing page for an interior design company. All right, it's done. Here, as you can see, we have a navigation bar at the top. Then we have the hero section. We have a large image here, looks good. Then we have the Our Services section. We also have the testimonial and the footer. Again, as you can see, it's not perfect, but it's a start. All right, the next tool we are going to discuss is make an image, okay? Using this tool, you can describe what kind of image you're looking for, and Figma will generate it for you. For instance, here, I am going to hit tab, and I'm going to hit make it, like that, and see what it's going to create. There it is. That's beautiful, isn't it? Here we have 4 options to choose from. Maybe this one looks a bit better, or this one. That's awesome. Now, what about the next tool? The next tool we are going to discuss is remove background. This tool, as you can guess from its name, allows you to remove your image backgrounds. If I hit it, look what happens. There it is. The background is gone. All right, what's next? The next tool we are going to discuss is this one, Translate To, which is so helpful. This tool will translate your website's content to any language you want in seconds. Let me show you how it works. Here I'm going to select this hero section, and I'm going to use this tool, Translate To. And then I'm going to choose from one of these supported languages, maybe German, and look what happens. You see that all our text within our hero section have been translated to German. That's awesome, isn't it? We have a few other tools as well that we are not going to discuss now, such as this find option or rewrite this. You can check them out, but I'm sure you've got an idea of how these AI tools work. And last but not least, we are going to discuss the dev mode. So what's the dev mode? Well, the dev mode simplifies our handoff process. What do I mean by that? Once you're done designing a project, you usually hand it over to a developer or a team of developers so that they can turn your design to code, right? And then the developers need to get access to your project and just inspect it and try to convert everything to code. Using dev mode, the handoff process will be much smoother. Why? Because here the developer can easily select any element, and on the right side, he or she can see all the CSS properties depending on the platform you're designing for. For example, if it's a website, they can choose CSS. If it's a mobile application, for example, iOS, they can specify Swift UI or UI Kit. Let me show you, and they'll see the relevant code here. Let's say they want to learn more about the spacing of your elements. In that case, they can just hover over these elements, and as you can see, they can quickly learn about the layout. For example, here the margin between these menu items is set to 40, right? And here the margin between this heading and this top navigation bar is set to 70. But dev mode is much more than that. If you want to learn more about dev mode, make sure to check out the dedicated video I created about it on my channel. If you want to learn more about UI design principles and become a professional UI designer, make sure to check out this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more design tutorials. Have a great day and see you soon.